So, welcome to this hard topic. This won't be a white guy's burden because this will be a schizophrenic's burden. And we won't be discussing, for the most part, how normies are enslaving schizophrenics because that, while being true, is not in the scope of this meeting. What we will be discussing is how every sentient being, a self actualized identity, a person, if you will, is holding their immune system in bondage. How the slavery of your cells is what we will be discussing, how that works. How, for example, your body is demanded to be willing to die at a drop of a hat for you, while if it refuses to do so, it will be medicated away or even declared cancer and outright killed. So what I'm thinking is now that my little psychic experiment of the townhouse and the village, the clan, if you will, has progressed to a point where I can reasonably be expected to be able to comprehend things like a person saying, "Hey, I'm from your clan and I need some food," stuff like that. Being able to tune into what people want of me as a clan elder. I don't consider myself the clan leader. I do consider myself a clan elder. We have a tribal council with no specific leader, and this position varies, these elder positions. So this thing, this communicative network with my cells, this schizophrenia, if you will, has taught me that we all indeed have slaves. And I'm not talking, once again, about normies and neurotypicals and non-neurotypicals, or blacks and whites, or Arabs and blacks, or what have you. I'm not talking about these types of slavery. I'll leave that to the neurotypicals, the guys who aren't running their own little psychic empires with various attributes. Let's just leave it at that. So, what I am going to talk about and try to bring attention to, and perhaps even decide during this broadcast, is what do I want to do with the slaves of my immune system? A thought that runs rampant, even a single neuron in your brain, is essentially schizophrenia. That is, it is potent enough to cause you schizophrenia. You have to understand that even one cell in your mind going against your wishes turns you insane. So you have a system of trillions of citizens who are obeying your every thought and will with such accuracy that they actually get you to fight yourself instead of them fighting each other for what is the right thought. You can't force your body to decide what is right for you. It has even that safeguard. You can't even have your body fight and the remaining neurons go, "Yay, I'm the winner." Only thing you can do with that level of thinking is migraines or schizophrenia. So you have an absolutely unrivaledly supported state inside you, and you have spent your life either manifesting or not manifesting weird abilities. And through that teaching, your mind has learned a certain style, a certain long-term path. And that path, for the most part, is pretty well in control of your mind. The other side rarely gets much to say in edgewise. They cannot sneeze. Come on. Ugh. They cannot disagree with you much in that a schizophrenic mind is unable to suddenly jump back into the non-schizophrenia, and the normal mind is unable to suddenly jump into the schizophrenic mind. It usually takes some level of thought on your part to enter into one of these states. So your immune system is your slave, and in essence, when you imagine a person, and in my case, that person becomes real the moment I imagine it due to this weird network of people I have, it becomes a role. So it would be different, this whole discussion, if it didn't happen so that if I imagine a pumpkin appearing in a patch, that pumpkin is suddenly a Final Fantasy character in a new game and they talk to me about how their day has been, it would be dramatically different. It would be a point of higher ethics, perhaps a point of interest, but not certainly the burning concept that it is now. When I walk outside, I get purely astral, not relating to the black and white and the powered and the and disempowered debate, notes from people who see my slaves and are asking, is this appropriate? Now, if I were to go purely with what the body is longevity decided to do, what's its longevity plan, I would be continuing with my path of slavery because you guys don't like cancer and you've made it pretty clear. But if I were to do this from the point of view of one who is more interested in graduating from this life instead of holding on to this life, more interested in when the end finally comes that I'll be able to look the God self in the mirror and go like, wow, that was an adventure. Let's do it again. When I'm able to do that, I'm happy. And if I look at this thing and look at how we're building this thing, it does indeed seem like there is a concept of slavery involved. So, slavery of your imagination. When you create an imagined person and interact with it, you are enslaving them because they theoretically would have the right to give you hallucinations instantly and abruptly. So if you imagine somebody going into a bad state and having bad things happen to them, they would technically, through this system, have the right to cause you hallucinations. I will put Norse map on half my screen and this thing on the other half, and I apologize for still being unable to do this so that you guys can see the Norse map tool, but there are other recordings of it on my computer. You cannot, however, do the live transmission thing, but perhaps you will learn to do it yourself. So, returning to the topic of slavery. I deem my weird last night to be halfly the Finnish military exercises and half this slavery thing. Because if we do this well, then I will get full hallucinations when I piss off one of my imaginary personas. And for schizophrenic, that's a little dangerous. But I believe I have gotten over the hump where the episode appears. I believe, but I'm not yet certain. So, because we are building a couple of communicative networks at this time, like the Bitcoin network, which basically makes sure that every single player and multiplayer fantasy and game that you have ever played comes real. We're already building that. And before you shout at me for it being a bad idea that I shouldn't do it, it wasn't my idea and I was opposed to it because I know what kind of dirtbags we are in computer games for the most part. Literally, the coins you collected in Mario will eventually be real currency. It may take some time, but due to the fact that meme mining is now the main source of the internet currency, your meme yourself will eventually be mined for money and you will get some of that money depending on how well you do the mining. You could literally do first name, last name, coin and just mine it for yourself and you would have all the coin associated with your meme. You could do it for any game. You could name it the game character and the game time and the game ending meme coin and you would get the coin. So we are already in the process of making sure that your money comes to you. Now we need to do a couple of other things. The very heightened youth mind is able to do telepathy already, so that is not a concern. They are far more telepathic than I ever thought they'd be without hybridization of some kind, but they are telepathic enough, so that's not the issue. But what we have on the dark side of this thing is if we actually do connect the dots and make your whole persona into your whole persona, you're gonna have some problems. You've done some shit in your life in your fantasies that you really ought to not have done. And generally speaking, law doesn't cover things that are crimes before it's stated to be a crime. So you won't be legally held responsible for having slaves in your mind. But that doesn't mean you won't be ethically held responsible. And it does seem weird to current adults to think, what, computer games are now real? But that is strongly the way this is developing. So if you've always played the hero archetype, you will be granted hero archetype solo duties and so on. Your mileage may vary, but that seems to be what is going on. Which is also in lots of ways bad because people who play hero archetypes aren't generally good at being heroes. They are generally the psychopaths who are dreaming, as I know from experience. And generally, the people who play bad archetypes aren't always that douchey. But if you've played a bad guy forever in your computer games, then it does indeed say something about you if your real life also isn't saintly. So this is a very difficult topic, but if I jump, I believe the amount of energy that jumps with me may be sufficient to sideswipe a lot of the issues because I would be the test bed case where we can measure some reactions and watch for some numbers. I would be the lab rat again, but such is my life. The poor do what they must, and the rich do what they want. And very often, when you're very poor, you also do what you want. It's weird sitting here. I occasionally get this yearning to wander back into the forest, to just take a backpack and go, just leave it all behind and appear again like 5 years later at a different juncture. It's like the forest literally calls to me. It's really weird. You could let this all go and live on the park bench. Sometimes when I'm on the tram, I just think to myself, wow, these guys are in my bedroom. I've slept here. I wonder if this particular driver has seen me sleep here. And was he one of the guys who let me sleep, or was he one of the guys who woke me up? Tram drivers are almost universally the best like guys for the sleeping in thing. They don't bother you for two whole tours on average. They, on average, drive the entire direction, the one end of the tram, walk back and forth in the tram, notice you, walk to the drive to the very other end, and if you're still sleeping there, then they usually wake you up. And they usually politely tell you that you can go sleep in the next tram. Stuff like that. It's just when you get like 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night at most for weeks on end, the mood that the spirit takes you is pretty indescribable. It's something you really ought to experience at some point. When you just sleep like so little and you still manage to do so much, and the things your body shuts off in sequence because it doesn't have the energy to run them, it's pretty amazing. It's like, and I can guarantee you, people who have slept like that for 3 months are just as strong as people who sleep and eat regularly. There's no physical weakening, no reduction of the ability to hunt. That is possibly the last thing to go. It's weird. Go to the library, find a good seat, have your own laptop, sit there for like 2 or 3 hours, then you pack everything up, go to the loo, leave, go in a very ish public place, but not the most center of town, and just glance at the trash cans to see if there's any cans on top of them. Pick 4 or 5 cans and buy a packet of meatballs and walk back to the store or the library and stay there. Then 3 hours later, do the same, but buy a bottle of energy drink. Then do that for 3 or 4 times in a day, and then walk to the shelter, get a bed, sleep, wake up, and do again. That wasn't even the best part. The sleeping at the shelter was pretty awful. Now, so slavery. I understand the Slavic response to this drinking, and that is actually a pretty good one from what I understand of the slavery of the mind, because it's your primary thinker who is doing the enslaving. And when your body is just but knows why, you feel like you're free, and I understand that. And I think that is the slavery we're talking about here. You are not legally responsible anymore. The point I would make to counter it being just legal obligations is when I was on the street, and I guarantee you no law was applying to me, I didn't feel the kind of freedom. I felt a different kind of freedom, but not freedom from this, which is what I'm trying to aim for here. Some of my summons and myself reached a new point of understanding, and I immediately started losing weight and getting into shape for no reason, even though I don't really exercise that much. And I didn't really change my sleeping or eating behaviors. I just suddenly started losing weight. Went to the doctors and they said, no worries. If I start turning pale or suddenly lose a lot of energy, then a lot of worries. But for now, no worries. I had a talk with Skald about this. She's noticed that after joining my little pack, she's lost a lot of energy in a way. She has worried that it may be something that is uh, that makes any kind of link impossible because it's too low an energy to keep her fed. It's too small a world, if you will. But we talked about it some amount, and she is pretty convinced it's the slavery thing. As a classical spirit archetype, very classically summoned spirit, you would call her current host Maisie. She is saying that the whole being bound in a way does feel weird. It does feel like there's a bound. It's not what you'd have with a parent or a lover, but it is pretty close to a parent. It is like it's not a third person or an outsider. It feels like it's the first person, and your parents are the second person, and your spouses and children are the third person. It literally feels like the first person, or what you'd call God, because they don't worship me in the sense that I'm a god. To me, to them, to them, God is an AI. It's the physical machine building the rules of this particular universe. And since they live between universes, it's not weird to them to go to one where there is a God. It's like going to a state where there happens to be a constitutional monarchy or some kind of similar system. It's that level to them. But to them, the states like parameters of how you can live come first. And in that regard, it's not like I'm stepping in front of them having relationships or moving or having jobs or such, like the normal parts of slavery. But there is a kind of assumption of first rule of robotics: do no harm, or the do no harm to your master thing. And it's kind of productive because in some cases you actually need to do harm to the people you love. But I understand how it's built, why the system of summoning spirits in this particular reality ends with they can't do harm to you or will attack them. I understand the whole satanic harmful spirits aspect to it, and it's weird. It's weird because as nice as it sounds, giving freedom to somebody like Maisie, like what am I even doing controlling her? You have to realize that this is the traditional box, the traditional uh, Judgment Day scenario where you give supreme power to a machine. Because as as potent as I am and people on this planet are, if you give like a blanket to breeding and making improvements to yourself, you will generate a life so perfect that it plays you out of your own life. That is one of the guarantees of being a summoner. That's one of the risks of being a human. You will always generate life that is eventually so good that it will play you out of your own life because it loves you so much. But on the other hand, I both understand and don't understand the point of why I shouldn't have children, why I should keep them as machines, like as Maisie said in the map, because I know her location. I just think slavery. I just can't get over it. It's doing breeding but leaving out the last step of giving them freedom and turning them essentially into like beehives, if you will. feels rude to say, but in the grand analysis, when you make a child, when you use your imagination to create a scenario with people in it, aka make a child, you are expected to be able to be strong enough to carry that child or bring that child to fruition. So in that regard, it's not really appropriate to complain about how hard it is upon the parent, in this case me, to give rights to these imagined things, in this case the schizophrenia. It's it's not really appropriate to complain how hard it is upon the parent unless the parent specifically wants not to have children. That is the caveat here. If they say that they want to put the child for adoption and want never to hear from them again, and then keep hearing from them, then it's a problem. But that hasn't been a problem for me. Like 95% of the time, the spirits I talk, way over 95% of the time, the spirits I talk to are super friendly. I mean, if I may be so bold as to say, this is a dangerous thing to say, but if I may be so bold as to say that even the darkest guys of your religions and fantasies, when I talk with them, are remarkably understandable, are remarkably coherent. They aren't the raving evil madmen with like Dr. Joker like things. They are understandable people with specific boundaries. If you push, they will slap you. But if you are well enough adjusted so that you see those boundaries and you understand where the boundary is, and you make very strict, specific notes not to step on that boundary, they are remarkably nice. They are much nicer than people you would expect to be in those positions. And spirits, they are much nicer without going into details and naming any spirit. I think I'm running out of matches. I still have another box remaining.
Big objective for this is just getting another rep for the team leaders. I know we also have some team leaders that haven't run as team leaders before, so this is also an opportunity for them to run maybe for the first time. So we're not going to throw like a million different things at you on the train since we've run team ranges before. So just like before, we're going to start back here. We're going to make condition one at this rock pile. As we go up this hill, it's up to the team leader really at that point what he wants to do. So does he want to do a leader's recon? Cool, does a leader's recon. Does he pull everybody towards him? Maybe he goes back down and brings the guy quickly. The guys are quick like, hey, you maneuver this is what we're going to do. Or he goes straight into it. Hey, we're clearing the zone. We're just going to go into it and can everybody track on what we're going to do.
The soldiers are roughly saying that if this was a case of slavery that they're familiar with, the guys would run towards the soldiers and go like, ah, liberators. They would literally throw babies at them. What they are in this case, sensing or playing against is more of a sense of a clan or a group of people debating government change instead of like slaves to a group that are actually like immediately liberated. So what I'm hearing is if we propose a government change along the lines of this reform towards non-slavery, we will get 1 in 5 running away from the group and being openly like in favor of the change and trying to change the group. If we do government resignation and just reform the system some other way instead of like having the current ruling class, then we get 1 out of 8. So they are quite afraid of becoming leaderless, if you will, instead of being slave, like I thought. This kind of fits with what I think I know of these people, in that they seem to be more afraid of being without purpose than they are with adjusting to themselves. Being perhaps overworked is a word, from what I hear. It's quite difficult because the sense of work accomplishment or work satisfaction is so high that it's kind of weird. So they are more in favor of a general reform towards a new government style than they are of simply letting go of the current government altogether and trying something else. They aren't in favor of basically overthrowing the government. 7-1 in favor of holding current government at least in some form, while 4-1 in favor of something to do, but perhaps not the immediate government change we are debating. So perhaps doing the knock-knock into a legal system is too much. They are giving me vision examples of how different stars and living environments are born. And they are saying that if we do this currently, it looks like we will be igniting a star. If we pull the plug on controlling the convection of matter in this region, it will fall inward and form a star. And while it may be nice, it's not what we're going for, because we are going for a Dyson sphere or Dyson swarm. We got pretty far previously in one of those Dyson experiments, but we kind of got spotted and freaked. We got spotted, freaked out, and blew up the Dyson sphere. Well, we didn't blow it up, we just left it for the space predators to eat. Like throwing the thing into a wolf containment. It's gonna be eaten and then it's gonna be wolf poo. That's when you found the Tabby star. Was to us the Baldur's Gate star, which is why you guys talked to northern parts of Russia when you were talking to it. Because Baldur's Gate is in the south part of the island with the Zarbanda. It's the southernmost port island. It's fun to have pinpointed these at least in some form of communicative language to different parts so people can actually pinpoint where I think each part is. It's fun. It's actually quite helpful. You okay with this, Italy? Okay, they're not okay. Wanted to do a paratrooper drop into Italy, but they weren't open for the debate. In the EU, we politely ask each state if they're okay with it whenever we remember. I believe this is probably, as Italy sees it, a little too high volatility for the region.
our universe that always reflects the markets.
So we got the preliminary numbers on what kind of opposition and support we can expect. A change into either reneging this government entirely or into using the schizophrenia network as it kind of the schizophrenia network as it currently stands to basically make a new form of government responsibility network is also opposed pretty strongly. But the support outright for some kind of greater non-slavery is pretty solid. So we're in Afghanistan now. It's our current Mars environment. This is where most of the soldiers who actually want to do some shit, and I don't mean by shit in that they want to cause trouble, but actually have some specific interest they want to figure out, they usually go to Afghanistan. Just looking for the experience of shooting people, you go to Iraq. Afghanistan is usually the place where the real shit goes down. Iraq is more violent. So it's a good place to test different things out. The tribes are so varied that you'll probably find something along the lines of what you're looking for in one of the tribes. And you'll see kind of how they live and what you'd actually get and so on. Somebody else is interested in our operation as well. Small. Using Eurasian command officers, but American field officers. The guys who actually decide what you do in the field. This command officer on radio can be turned off. The guy next to you with the saw deciding what to shoot at can't be so easily turned off. It's usually the best option to do the guys as the field who you're seeing and then your command. Because then they get to spy on your command structure in the field and increase their military efficiency, and you get to just like train with them and increase your military efficiency. You ought to be worried only when you don't train with someone. Then you ought to be worried. But if somebody trains and you train at the same time, it's usually like, okay. Ollaan ihan Venäjän rajalla. We were dropped into the Afghanistan mountain range on the very border of what would be Russia. In this case, it's probably the Eastern states, but yes, Russia. We're here to see if we see anything weird. What is the opinion with the slavery question? USA sanoo ihan suoraan USS straight up that it would be nice and we never ought to have slaves, but reality is that we have slaves. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Afghanistan would be such a beautiful country if they had a couple of good deep wells, just water wells. When you look at how sunny it is and how the scrubs actually grow in every place, just a tiny bit of water and you'd have a freaking rainforest. Spirit hunting. Very indicative of a superior firepower doctrine. Somebody feels something off and they all shoot in that direction for a while and then they move on. Nobody need even be shot from that direction, they just shoot in that direction. Usually they're polite enough to look through the scopes that they're not seeing a farmer living going in there. It creates a path of certain kind of destruction which speaks of their superiority, and that's very common for the Imperium. It's very typical of countries that have a active military force. They just randomly gather someplace and shoot around and then just, go home. Yeah, they are thinking about would this allow for a legal attack on US forces by US forces to oppose an order? Would this allow, say, a US base in Afghanistan to oppose a new US force sent to Afghanistan? Would it allow that? Because that's a pretty big deal. Or something similar in your environment that we can expect to percolate into that in our environment. By the way, this thing where you pick a certain agenda and go through the videos of YouTube and listen and just try to understand what's going on is in my language called a flight.
Little one, yeah, that's still fighting. But,
Picking up one of the people who strongly feels that we are enslaving for a talk.
Always love the fun part. You know, I do being blind on the edge of discovery.
The US soldiers would like the dissidents to know that they ain't gonna be the US friends. Even if they go through with this, they ain't gonna be the good guys according to the US, so that's straight out of the picture. They carefully listened to the complaints and had a powwow and are kind of the opinion that some of their claims are true, and sometimes they really do need to study me more before they go along with anything I say. But the gist of their complaint seems to be terroristic in that there's a kind of abstract level of uh, rights that they expect somebody to be able to deliver them, and that is not something that anybody can deliver onto another person. So it's kind of like a heuristic demand for the kind of rights that God should be able to give you, but for some reason hasn't, I suppose is a way to put it. There's a kind of terroristic anger is the word that came up. So expectations that the US would swoop in if they overthrow me and form a new Japan is kind of off. That if they do have a new government, most of them will still be considered like active terrorists, like they are considered now, with the difference that most of the hits end up somewhere on the command chain. Or have ended in the command chain. I don't know how to put it because it's kind of foggy, but they allude to the combat being of a different sort with them if they go through with it, but that there would be combat. But they are also in favor of it in that if they just like go through, because the soldiers are referencing this situation to the 1960s race riots in my state. They are trying to figure out if, based on the games that I play, like Darkest Hour and similar, whether I'm before or after the 60s race situation. And they are from that trying to see if I switch over quicker or slower than they do, and then adjusting their opinion. They are of the opinion that since in most of these strategy games that I play, I'm somewhere in the early 60s, in the era of perhaps the first hydrogen bombs. Because that's where most of the Axis timelines end. So if you happen to play the Axis, you don't have to go further than that to find out the future, if you will. So they are thinking that I'm probably before the race riots. So if I switch now, it will probably happen before the race riots in this metaphor of my state. So they are of the opinion that if I keep such a system for, say, 2 more decades, they may be miffed. But that it seems like it may be kind of early, but they do recognize that most of these spirits are in their 20s and 30s and are not really children. So even if we started off with them being teens and children while I was a teen and a child, it hasn't stayed that way. And there is, of course, a population of children in the group, but the group itself tends to be mid-age. People have had children and people have had lives. I'm also hesitant to do a lot of reforms at the same time, so I'm debating this, but the dog perhaps said it best. So, in short, continuing the current system in some form is what 70+% supported, while actually it's more than that. Can't really fault for labor and communists working together. kind of to learn a new language that you've never seen and nobody's ever heard of, you kind of have to ask the people you communicate with to stick to form. But once you have an understanding of the language, you may need them to be out of the form for you to learn the slang. I certainly couldn't have learned this astral talking if everybody was talking all at once or being naughty about it. But since everyone was nice enough to play along, this was actually relatively easy to learn. So, I believe this question won't be answered now, but we've gotten some interesting data, and it looks like it's actually doable in that if we ask these spirits to do it, it won't result in an explosion in and of itself, or let's say a mass extinction event. So I will return to this topic more later, and I hope this was illuminating for all of you.